Tons of players are fighting to carve out their role in the NBA right now. While development is encouraged throughout the league and drafting for potential has become more popular than ever, it's a very cutthroat league at the end of the day. At seemingly any point, if a project player fails to live up to their expectations, they could be benched, traded, or fade into obscurity super fast. Most players that are kept in a team's plans for their potential never really pan out. But at the same time, you can't ignore the success stories of teams believing in players like Giannis or Pascal Siakam. There will always be diamonds in the rough, and today we've brought you 6 of those players from varying skill levels that show way too much potential to give up on. The first player we have is 22-year-old shooting guard for the Houston Rockets, Jaylen Green. Jaylen has been a polarizing player ever since he got drafted, but don't be fooled, he has immense talent and is a gifted scorer. In his rookie year, he came out averaging 17 points per game on a largely directionless Rockets team, and only improved his scoring to 22 points per game in his second season. By all indicators, he should have taken a leap to potential all-star status for his third year in the NBA. This never happened though. Instead, Jaylen seemed to regress, and this happened for a few reasons. First of all, the Rockets have gone from a directionless team where Jaylen can just run around with the ball doing whatever he wanted to a legitimate team trying to win basketball games. They've brought in vets Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks, in addition to players like Alperen Sengun and Jabari Smith Jr. coming into their own. Simply put, there's just less of the ball to go around on the Rockets these days. But here's the crucial reason. Jaylen absolutely needs to develop his shooting and basketball IQ. He's been a certified chucker for all 3 years in the NBA, having a career field goal percentage of 42%. That is an absolutely terrible percentage, and if he didn't show so much promise, his role would probably be bench warmer by now. He has a passable looking jump shot, and when he's feeling himself, he looks great from anywhere on the court, but his shot selection has to improve before it's too late. He also needs to improve at drawing fouls. For a player whose bread and butter is driving with a quick first step, averaging 4 free throw attempts per game as of last year just isn't cutting it. Don't give up on Jaylen though. If things ever click with him and he really figures the game out, he will be one of the deadliest scorers in the entire league. Check back in a few years after some more development and a solid point guard on the team, and we could see an entirely new Jaylen Green. The next player we have today is Cole Anthony. This 24-year-old point guard for the Orlando Magic has seen his role reduced in recent years to a spark plug off the bench. But if we rewind to a few years ago, Cole Anthony was looking like one of the best young guard prospects in the entire NBA. In his second season, he was given way more responsibility than he could handle, due to the Orlando Magic being an injury-riddled dumpster fire. With Markelle Fultz out for the majority of the season and nobody else able to step up, Anthony was the one who became Orlando's starting point guard. During this season, he averaged 16 points and almost 6 assists, in addition to being a very high flyer for a generous 6'2". By all means, it looked like Cole was locked in for a major role with the Magic once he developed a bit and fixed that god-awful 39 field goal percentage. The Magic have seemingly gone in another direction though. With the arrival of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, who both feel comfortable with the ball in their hands, proven by a combined 9 assists per game, the Magic have chosen to rightfully hand those two the keys to the team. Let's not forget that Markelle Fultz eventually came back and took Cole Anthony's starting job from him as well. To make things worse, Anthony has struggled with injuries in recent years, including a particularly troublesome oblique injury that kept him out for a month, and a lot of Magic fans think it's had lingering effects on his game. Basically, the perfect storm happened to give Anthony a major setback in his career. It's way too early to give up on him though. He's only 24 years old. Despite setbacks, Anthony has proven that he can be a very valuable player. He's got natural scoring skills, he's one of the more athletic guards in the league when healthy, he has a knack for playmaking, and when locked in can be a complete pest on defense. There have been tons of players who have broken out after a few years of trouble. This includes big names like Jimmy Butler, who had a rough few first seasons with efficiency similar to Anthony's. An even better comparison would be Kyle Lowry though, who had a terrible start to his career and actually didn't make his first All-Star game until 28 years old. Don't expect Cole Anthony to have a breakout season and become an All-Star overnight. but I'm confident that he'll have a great starting role eventually in his career. It just may not be on the Magic when there are already a lot of mouths to feed. Speaking of terrible starts, the next player on this list is Scoot Henderson. Scoot had a really bad start to his NBA career, and I mean really bad. Despite high expectations as the third pick, in the first 2 months of his rookie season, he averaged an abysmal 33 field goal percentage, and could barely break double digits while starting. There was a point where the majority of people considered Scoot a legitimate bust somewhere soon after this terrible few months. Luckily, despite being sent to the bench after this terrible start, Scoot was busy honing his game as the people yapped about him being a bust. Over the course of his rookie season, he ended up slowly improving to a pretty decent level, good enough to nab the starting spot back come the All-Star break. And by the time the season had finished, Scoot had finally put a decent month of NBA basketball together. For the month of April, he averaged close to 20 points and 10 assists. At 41 field goal percentage for the month, he was still kind of chucking, but it shows a clear improvement from the start of his career, which is what you want to see. With the rate he's already improved, don't be surprised if he has a proper breakout season in a year or two. Scoot has legitimate all-star potential, and I think at this point almost everybody can see that. It's only natural that a shorter guard would need some time to adjust to the freak level athleticism and defense in the NBA.
Another player you should definitely not give up on is Walker Kessler. Leading up to the 2022 offseason, the stagnation and infighting between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell kind of forced the Utah Jazz to the realization it was time to split the pair up. So despite the franchise finishing 5th in the West for that year and continually being amongst the top regular season teams in the West, the 2022 offseason started a full-blown rebuild for the Utah Jazz. Luckily for the franchise, Danny Ainge was putting moves in place to make that transition as swift and painless as possible. And one of those moves turned out to be Walker Kessler. A lot of the things that made Walker a promising prospect to the Jazz are also the same things that first drew the Jazz to Rudy Gobert at the beginning of his career. Physically a daunting figure in front of the rim, and also had the skill and capability to back up that stature. And honestly, if you ignore Rudy's rookie season, where he averaged under 10 minutes a game, they both had a very similar start to their careers, statistically. Aside from Rudy low-key blowing Walker out in rebounds, but to his credit, Kessler has averaged more blocks than Rudy did during the beginning of his career, and even now today, where Walker has averaged more blocks a game than Rudy for back-to-back seasons. If you're not familiar with Walker Kessler, you might be thinking to yourself, wow, this guy sounds pretty good. I wonder why he might be on this list. Well, it's true that he's shown spurts of promising development. That's kind of the problem. They're only coming in spurts. Despite him seeming like the perfect Rudy replacement, Coach Will Hardy has been reluctant in giving him that respect. During his rookie season, Walker popped off and proved that he's a capable rim protector, having the 3rd most total blocks that season and 4th in block averages, which was good enough to earn him a respectable 23 minutes a game. The next season, where, as mentioned, he still performed and actually slightly improved as a rim protector, and for this progression, he saw a noticeable minutes increase to 23.3 minutes a game. If we're giving all fairness to Will Hardy, the reason he's not playing Walker as much could just be because of the makeup of the team. They already got a lot of big guys. And with the literal worst defense in the entire league, Walker's presence out there isn't something that's exactly valued on this team right now. So if he does continue to get drowned out and forgotten in Utah, we as fans should still keep an eye on him, as he does still have amazing defensive potential that a lot of teams around the league would love to have. Expanding on that, another big man that's kind of being underappreciated by their franchise, Evan Mobley. Before even entering the NBA, Mobley was gaining quite a bit of traction and expectations, as his 2021 draft class was seen as one of the better drafts in recent memory, especially near the top, with some draft analysts suggesting that the top 5 prospects in the draft were expected to be quote-unquote franchise-altering players. Well, fast forward to 2024 and how the early development in the league has gone for those 5 players. Cade Cunningham and Scottie Barnes both appear to be clear success stories. We've already mentioned Jaylen Green, but as for the 3rd and 5th overall picks, their careers haven't exactly had the same hype or buzz surrounding it. In Mobley's case, this is partially due to the structure of the Cavs, having Jarrett Allen being paired with Mobley. This duo definitely does see success and was part of the reason the team managed to get 48 wins and the 4th seed in the East. But this almost instant success with this duo hasn't actually been the most helpful to Mobley's overall career, as since entering the NBA, his role on the team has been exactly the same season over season. So much so that his advanced stats almost look like they're just copy and pasted. And these are stats that you would usually see a fluctuation in for a highly rated draft pick. The most notable of these being his usage rate, which has only ever seen a 0.4% change. Again, that's pretty ridiculous for a player of Mobley's stature. Some people could chalk his stagnant role in the Cavs up to the fact that he was just the most NBA ready prospect in that draft class, and therefore the Cavs knew the role he'd play on the team and plugged him right into that role. But that's not good enough to just give up completely on development and stop progressing the needs of this team. Because despite the Cavs being the 4th seed, they do have dire needs that have to be addressed. You could see the problem starting to unfold in last year's playoffs, when Donovan Mitchell got injured, leaving Darius Garland to lead this team once again. But an issue that was brewing up in the franchise, kind of under the radar for a while, was put on blast. Since Donovan's arrival in Cleveland, Darius Garland has kind of been a shell of the player he was developing into before that 2022 offseason. And ultimately, the same thing could end up happening between Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, as again, there's little growth with Mobley's role. So ultimately, in this case, we're looking at a player whose ceiling is really being blocked once again by their own franchise. But going back to that 2021 draft class and the 5th player that was amongst the top prospects, Jaylen Suggs. Obviously, the start of his career hasn't been nearly as impressive as the other 5 top picks. Part of the reason for this is his very rough early struggle with injuries, playing only 48 games in his rookie season, then 53 the year after. However, this season, he has really bounced back, managing to play and start 75 games this year, and it was a pretty impressive 75 games. You could actively see him over the season setting into his role and becoming the workhorse this team needed, grinding it out and becoming a really dynamic defensive player. For some casual fans who really aren't going to watch the Magic anyways, Suggs might not get the respect he deserves. But with the crazy amount of talent in the league, more and more matchups are being decided by the depth of your roster rather than just the talent at the top, making dudes like Trey Murphy actually kind of valuable, and this is the mold Suggs is most likely going to grow into. Already as mentioned, developing amazingly on the defensive end of the floor, but the fact that he started off his career with a horrid 3-point percentage at just 21% on 4.1 attempts a game, and now has managed to work that up to 40% on 5.1 attempts a game should be proof that his growth is actually happening. And although he may not be a first option like Scottie or Cade, he's sure to still have a long successful career as a 3-and-D grind type player. Although these guys mentioned don't have the same hype as some of the other younger players like Ja Morant, Anthony Edwards, and so on, that doesn't mean you should completely give up on these guys and their potential. So be sure to keep an eye on these 6 extremely talented young players. If you made it this far, give the video a like. While you're down there, you might as well just subscribe and let us know in the comments if you think there's any players that we missed. And as for that, we'll see you next week for the next upload.